Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Harold Washington Library Center. I'm Chris Brown, Library Commissioner for the Chicago Public Library. And today is a momentous occasion where we gather to celebrate a landmark in legislation led by Governor JB Pritzker and Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias. Make no mistake, these two are championing intellectual freedom, and their efforts to ban book banning in Illinois will serve as a model in our country committed to our civil liberties. And this is coming at a moment where book banning has reached unprecedented levels. We have to stand up for what's right and be able to tell our stories and freely access our collective and diverse history. We find ourselves at this critical juncture where the support of our leaders is more important than ever. And it's fitting that we make this historic announcement in the Harold Washington Library. The city of Chicago, our city library, was the first library in the country to commit to an intellectual freedom statement all the way back in 1936. Today, we honor that legacy. Today's action sends a resounding message that book banning has no place in Illinois or in our society. Chicago is where we celebrate the people of our city. It's woven into the fabric of our library. During this unprecedented surge in book bannings happening around the country, Chicago Public Library has established our 81 library locations as book sanctuaries, as safe spaces for diverse voices, and have been joined by over 2,000 leaders throughout the country, through all 50 states. We are committed to the availability of banned books and programs that reflect our collective diversity. And in 2023, our city library's 150th anniversary, we're privileged to add another chapter to this story with today's historic milestone announcement. Of course, book banning is an attempt to silence us, but the actions taken today by Illinois speak loud and clear about our state's unwavering commitment to intellectual freedom. We're grateful for the leadership of Governor JB Pritzker and Secretary Giannoulias, and are honored to have them here with us today. And so without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed Governor, Dr. JB Pritzker.
My parents always dreamed of their son, the doctor. Here it is. Thank you so much to Chris, and thank you to all of you with the Chicago Public Libraries. Thank you for the kind introduction and for hosting us. Good afternoon to everybody that's here. I love to see this enormous crowd and of enthusiastic folks who care deeply about the subject matter of today's press conference. I'm thrilled to be here at Harold Washington's Thomas Hughes Children's Library alongside our Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton, our Secretary of State, Alexi Giannoulias, the American Library Association's Executive Director, Tracy Hall, legislative leaders who've joined us today, labor and nonprofit partners, and community members. Also, congratulations to the City of Chicago on the 150th anniversary of the Chicago Public Library. In 2022, there were 67 attempts to ban books here in Illinois. Books about coming of age and mental health. Books about LGBTQ plus kids and teens. Books about the Black experience and racism. Renowned classics like The Kite Runner and To Kill a Mockingbird. This is not the first time in history that we've seen this. The United States has gone through periods of protests against works by authors like Charles Darwin and Mark Twain and J.D. Salinger. The argument for banning books always begins with the claim that it's about protecting the children. And yes, of course, we all want to protect our children, so they're reading age-appropriate material. But banning books from libraries isn't about that at all. Book bans are about censorship. marginalizing people, marginalizing ideas and facts. Regimes ban books, not democracies. Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, the Taliban's Afghanistan. We refuse to let a vitriolic strain of white nationalism coursing through our country determine whose histories are told, not in Illinois. This is the land of Lincoln, the home state of the first black president. Illinois was the first state in the nation to ratify the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. We were the first state in the nation to ratify the 19th Amendment, guaranteeing women the right to vote. And in a few moments, Illinois will become the first state in the nation to officially ban book bans once and for all. Here in Illinois, we don't hide from the truth, we embrace it, all of it. I'm the father of 2 children, and I'm also a proud American. Our nation has a great legacy and much to be proud of. And I want our children to learn our true history, warts and all. Illinois' young people shouldn't be kept from learning about the realities of the world. I want them to become critical thinkers, exposed to ideas that they disagree with, proud of what our nation has overcome, and thoughtful about what comes next. All Illinoisans deserve to see themselves reflected in the books that they read, the art that they see, the history they learn. While certain hypocritical governors are banning books written by LGBTQ authors, but then claiming censorship when the media fact-checks them, here in Illinois, we are showing the nation what it really looks like to stand up for liberty. As simple as that. I encourage all Illinoisans to read about experiences different from your own. Expose yourself to ideas you disagree with, ideas that challenge you. Maybe one day you'll pick up a pen and write your own authentic story, and it will likely be found on the shelves of your local library right here in Illinois. So thank you, and with that, it is my great honor to introduce an avid reader and our Secretary of State, Alexi Giannoulias.
Thank you, Governor Pritzker, for the introduction. Thank you for your leadership. And thank you for one of the most inspirational State of the State addresses I've ever heard. If you have a chance to go back and find a recording of it, and you want to hear an impassioned plea for what our democracy is all about, I encourage you to hear Governor Pritzker's address, which was an inspiration to me and to our staff, that we have to step up and do the right thing. It's also a good time for me to let you know that my beautiful wife and my 11-month-old daughter are here. Not just because I wanted her to see her dad, but as I think about the next generation and the generation after that, I think it's important that we step up and fight for our kids and for our grandkids. That's why all of us are here. That's why we've chosen to get involved in politics, to run for office and to help. I also want to thank the governor for signing this groundbreaking bill into law. And lastly, I want to give a special shout out to my friend Commissioner Brown and to my great friend Linda Johnson Rice for all their work at the Chicago Public Libraries. When I was on the board of the Chicago Public Libraries, I learned so much about the importance of our libraries in every single community, whether it's on the north side, the west side, south side of Chicago. We do so much incredible work. And my own daughters have been to Harold Washington, played in this room, and spent time here with kids that look different and come from different neighborhoods and have the opportunity to learn about any subject that their parents want them to. I'd also like to thank the bill sponsors, my good friends Representative Ann Stava Murray and Senator Laura Murphy for shepherding this bill through the General Assembly. I want to especially thank and applaud another very important group, many of whom are here today, that have been critical in helping us conceive and pass this bill. Since we first introduced this legislation in January, our librarians and the entire library community has played an instrumental role in advocating for its approval. Yes. I want to thank all of you, all of the librarians across the state and across the country, for all that you do for the communities you serve. Librarians are heroes, and I remember vividly the helpful hints that librarians gave me and my brothers as kids at the Edgewater Library on Broadway and Elmdale. How to research information, how to find books, how to access the vast resources our libraries hold that many children and parents don't even know exist, and how to truly love and embrace learning. Librarians can unlock the potential each and every child has and can give that child individual attention and inspiration. Yet somehow, librarians have become targets by a movement that disingenuously claims to pursue freedom, but instead promotes authoritarianism. Tragically, our libraries have become thunderdomes of controversy and strife across our nation, the likes of which we've never seen before. These radical attacks on our libraries have divided our communities, and our librarians have been harassed, threatened, and intimidated for simply doing their jobs. Many librarians have been forced to quit after being harassed and subjected to intimidation and hateful messages on social media. Others have been fired for refusing to remove books from circulation. Well, in Illinois, we're saying enough. The need to stand up and fight for librarians, libraries, and the freedom of speech, especially at this perilous time for our democracy, is why I initiated House Bill 2789. This legislation, the first of its kind in the United States of America, is a triumph for our democracy, a win for First Amendment rights, and most importantly, a great victory for future generations to come. Under this law, Illinois libraries will not be eligible for state-funded library grants if they ban books. Specifically, yes. Specifically, Illinois libraries must adhere to the American Library Association's Bill of Rights, which states that books should not be removed if they expect to receive state funding from the Secretary of State's office. This first-of-its-kind legislation is important because the concept of banning books contradicts the very essence of what our country stands for. It also defies what education is all about: teaching our children to think for themselves. When books are banned, we're at risk from the harm that ignorance brings. Yes. Ray Bradbury, the acclaimed Illinois author who wrote Fahrenheit 451, which, by the way, is a book that's been banned in certain places, once said, "You don't have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading them." And that's where the real danger lies. Just because books aren't burned in a local town square doesn't make restricting public access to them any more acceptable. Parents, and only parents, have the right and the responsibility to restrict their children's and only their children's access to library resources. In other words, you get to decide what's right for your children, but you don't get to make that decision for anyone else's. Tragically, several states have passed laws during the past 2 years calling for librarians to face prison time or pay fines for allowing access to quote-unquote harmful books. More than 10 other states right now are considering similar bills. And these are not states that are far off. Right next door to us, legislative efforts have been made to remove books and punish librarians for simply having a book on a shelf. In Missouri, lawmakers passed legislation that can fine or even jail school librarians who provide students with certain books. In Iowa, the governor's education bill contains measures to remove any book directly from libraries. And in Indiana, the Senate passed a measure allowing librarians to be charged with felonies based on materials checked out of school libraries. PEN America reported 2,532 instances of books being banned in schools last year, affecting more than 1,600 titles, including many American classics, some of which the governor mentioned, such as 1984 by George Orwell, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, The Color Purple by Alice Walker, and even I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. Of the more than 2,500 bans, 96% were enacted without following the best practice guidelines for book challenges outlined by the American Library Association. Is it any surprise that these objectionable books are predominantly by or about people of color, LGBTQ, or other ethnicities, that they are books containing information about history, race, gender, or social justice? We are reaching the point where hate speech is protected, but the simple act of reading a book is a restricted right. Yes. It's honestly hard and deeply disheartening to figure out how we got to this point. But regardless, it's generationally dangerous and shameful that it has gotten this far. But we in Illinois are doing something about it. Our legislation establishes a clear path, opposite and away from the dangerous trend of banning and censoring books that a small but loud few disagree with. This new law aims to unify our communities and seeks to restore a right that some of us may have grown to take for granted, the freedom to think for ourselves. It's my hope that others may look toward Illinois and see the value in adopting our legislation as a model to stop banning books in its tracks and to protect the right to read freely without fear of retribution. We are lucky to live in Illinois, where we have such great legislators, elected officials, a lieutenant governor and a governor report who lead on issues that are important and do the right thing. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to introduce our Senate sponsor and my good friend, Senator Laura Murphy.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Laura Murphy, State Senator in the 28th District, and I'm honored to be here with all of you and with these fabulous leaders standing behind me, particularly Governor Pritzker, Secretary of State Janulius, because without their help, who knows where we would be. I'm honored to be in a state where we have these kinds of leaders that can help further our agenda. We saw early in the General Assembly cycle that our libraries were under attack, and we knew we had to do something. And so as this bill presented when it passed out of the House, I was thrilled to be able to be the sponsor in the Senate, because we know what happens when we have censorship. Censorship, like banning books, comes from fear. It's insidious. It spreads like a disease and leaves our vulnerable communities really injured. We cannot allow ourselves to give into fear. We must stand against this fear, which is disguised as moral outrage, and stand up for what we know is right. We know that our libraries serve as that equalizer, that common denominator that allows any child, person, adult, anyone can walk into a public library and be treated equally. They have access to every bit of the same information. There is nothing that controls their ability to read. There's no income guidelines or color or creed, gender, sexual basis that is required to take out a library book. The only thing required is an interest to read. And when we've seen these attacks across the nation where people are trying to clamp down on that interest to read, we had to do something. So it was great to have the support from these leaders that allowed us to do this. Think of the first time you opened a book that required you to think outside yourself, to expand your horizons, to learn what other things could potentially be possible. The first time you read The Grapes of Wrath, the first time you read Catcher in the Rye, The Great Gatsby, all these wonderful American classics, the first time you read those and it expanded your horizons. And why shouldn't every child, every person that goes to visit a library be able to experience that same event? So this law is designed to protect our libraries. Our libraries are an invaluable resource to our communities. And they offer so much more than books. They offer a community meeting place. They offer just unprecedented access to life-changing events. The only thing they do is they say to people, if you read, you will succeed. And we want people to succeed. We want them to have different opinions, different ideas, to bring different views to a discussion, because that's only when we progress and when we further our agendas in the state. So this is a state that we can all be proud of, that we can lead the way in Illinois to ensure we eliminate these barriers. And I was honored to do this in the Senate, and I'm honored now to introduce our House leader, Representative Anna Murray, who led the bill in the House. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Ann Stava Murray, representative to the 81st District. The right to read is inseparable from freedom of opinion, freedom of expression, and freedom of speech. Sadly, we've seen this action is needed for every Illinoisan to be able to fully enjoy this very fundamental right. The epidemic of book banning isn't unique to Illinois. Across the country, authoritarian censorship has been on the rise. I've said before that the banning of books is the sort of behavior commonly associated with authoritarian regimes for good reason. Those pushing book banning say they are doing it to protect people. Well, that's just not true. Book banning is most frequently used to silence the voices of the LGBTQ+ community, as well as people of color. It isn't about keeping people safe. It's about keeping them marginalized. And that means it is entirely inconsistent with fundamental American values. Allowing local governments to impose partisan, religious, or doctrinal restrictions on their school and local libraries and still obtain state grants sends a message that this behavior is acceptable and that the state is sanctioning the silencing of minority and diverse groups. That is what's unacceptable. We're here today to stand for the principle that taxpayer dollars belong to everyone, not just to those who are part of an in-crowd or whose views, lifestyles, or choices have been sanctioned by some majority clique. It's true that this puts us at odds with some of our neighbor states, but here in Illinois, we've never been afraid to stand strong on our values and principles. Doing so while other states embrace prejudice and divisive ideologies is a hallmark of our state. While it's true that kids need guidance and that some ideas can be objectionable, trying to weaponize local government to force one-size-fits-all standards onto the entire community for reasons of bigotry or as a substitute for active and involved parenting is wrong. While it's true, I want to thank Secretary of State Giannoulias, Chief Senate Sponsor Laura Murphy, and everyone else who helped move this bill forward and get it across the finish line. I especially want to thank Governor Pritzker for seeing the value in this important bill and being here today to sign it into law. When we protect free speech and freedom of expression for everyone, when we treat every perspective and point of view with respect and dignity, we move toward a brighter future for everyone in Illinois. Thank you. And next, I'd like to introduce Tracy Hall.
I'm standing there with a lump in my throat and in my stomach because history is being made in this room right now. We are not on the sidelines. We are here in this room. And I am so grateful. I am grateful because the moment that this bill became a reality, I shared it with the library community on social media, and the first person who responded, they said, someone is standing up. And the next person said, Illinois is standing up. Illinois is standing up. It is no accident that the very first amendment in our Bill of Rights upholds freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right to read. It is those freedoms and the right to learn and to access information that serves as the core of the American Library Association, the core of our mission, and of the mission of libraries across this country. And I am so grateful that my home library is the Chicago Public Library. As Executive Director of the American Library Association and as a representative today for the thousands of members of the American Library Association and the over 5,000 institutions and stakeholders who believe in libraries and the right to read, I could not be prouder that the American Library Association, founded in 1876 and based for much of its 147 years right here in Chicago, makes its home in a state that is first in the nation to create a law that stands up to censorship and calls it what it is: a threat to education, to libraries, to our individual freedoms, and a threat to our democracy. Let us take pride in this day, for history will surely assess this moment in the years to come. And note that we, librarians and legislators, civic leaders and community stewards, did not stand idly by and let the right to read and to freely access libraries be taken from us. Right. But rather, we insisted. And I had to turn around because it's easy to do nothing. But that is not what happened. Illinois insisted, our lawmakers insisted. In the words of the American Library Association Freedom to Read Foundation, we insist that free people must always read freely. Free people read freely. And with those words, and with my heart so full, so happy, and so proud, it is my privilege to introduce Juliana Stratton, the first 48th Lieutenant Governor of Illinois.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, she, her pronouns. It is such an honor to be introduced by a longtime friend and colleague, Tracy Hall, who, by the way, made history as the first Black woman to lead the American Library Association. Thank you, Tracy, for that warm introduction and for your steadfast leadership in the fight against censorship and for access to diverse stories for all. Of course, I also want to thank Governor Pritzker for your commitment to truth, liberty, and an Illinois that is inclusive of all of us. The governor has already acknowledged the state and legislative leaders, city leaders, organizations, and community partners here with us. So to Secretary Janulius and all who stand with us today, in the interest of time, I just want to thank you for your presence. All of you here who recognize we cannot go back, who refuse to accept the silencing of our voices, who know that our state will lead the way to show that our only way forward is together. I am so proud to stand with you today to make it clear that we not only celebrate the right to be seen and heard as your authentic self, but that we will not hold back when any attempt is made to restrict who we are and who gets to tell our story. Yes. The poet and human rights activist Cesar A. Cruz stated that art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Art, like fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, allows us to see the whole story, to take in all perspectives, and to see ourselves reflected when we have for too long been shut out or silenced. If we weren't able to read books like Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, one of the most challenged books of 2022, the real experiences of the trauma caused by systemic racism and sexism on Black girls, would be cast to the shadows. If we weren't able to read books like Art Spiegelman's Mouse, we would not have as deep of an understanding of the horrors of the Holocaust to guide us as we fight against the rising tide of anti-Semitism, something that we must fight against with everything we've got. I will just say, if we weren't able to read books like Maya Kobabe's memoir, Gender Queer, another work that's been threatened by censorship, we would lose the vibrant, rich stories that show us that we do not have to conform to the gender binary. Because when you try to erase our stories, you're trying to erase us. When you try to water down our narrative, you're trying to water down our contributions to our society, to our state, to our world. And when you try to minimize our history, you're trying to minimize us. And you're trying to assert that our LGBTQ+ community and our BIPOC communities don't have a place in our history, don't belong in our future. But here in Illinois, that will never be the case. And yes, that means we have to face the good, the bad, and the painful realities that are often woven into these narratives. But it also means that so many of us who have been marginalized and feel like they are alone in their journeys can find understanding and solidarity between the pages. So when we say that we are a welcoming state, when we say that hate has no home here because we are a home for all, we act on it. And it comes as no surprise that Illinois is leading in this space. We are, and we will continue to set the right example, showing what it looks like to stand on the right side of history. As I close, I just want to say again, congratulations to the Chicago Public Library on your 150th anniversary. And I want to express my deepest gratitude to the librarians here, who, by the way, I see on a regular basis, and those all across our state who are brilliant and trusted professionals who not only promote literacy and access to information, but you also create a safe and welcoming space in our communities. We see you, we respect you, and we stand with you. Thank you again, and now I am thrilled to invite the governor to come sign this bill into law and end book bans in the state of Illinois.
Spectacular.
Don't grab his hair. Like he's done this.
Happy to take any questions from members of the media.
Governor,
Yes, sir.
This is law. What happens if a local school board signs off on hate speech, a book that denies that the Holocaust happened, or a book that says that Donald Trump won the 2020 election?
Yeah, I'm going to allow the secretary to take that, and then I'll have a comment after.
Great question. So what this law does is it says let's trust the experience and education of our librarians to decide what books should be in circulation. So we are not saying that every book should be in every single library. What we're saying is when this decision is made by libraries and librarians for what book belongs there, that they have to abide by the American Library Association's Bill of Rights, which means that a book cannot be taken out of circulation simply for partisan or doctrinal beliefs. It's very simple, and if you do that, you're not eligible for state funding. One of the, go ahead.
No, would you be able then to put on the shelf a book that denies the Holocaust?
Again, librarians for many years have decided what books belong in circulation. We trust their expertise and experience. You know, one of the Republican legislators brought up this really terrible example of, well, any book can be in the library now, and there can be a book on how to build bombs. That's got nothing to do with this legislation. That will not be the case. It will continue not to be the case. Again, what we're saying simply is a book cannot be removed that's already currently in circulation for partisan or doctrinal beliefs. It's very simple, straightforward, and our librarians have begged for this legislation. I could not be more proud of it.
Does it differentiate between school libraries and public libraries like this one?
It's for all libraries that want to receive state grants.
So what if there are downstate communities in certain parts of the state that say they don't want books like genderqueer, which has kind of been one of the forefront books out there. They don't want that on there. Would that local librarian not have the right to decide we're not going to stop that book?
So this goes to the whole point of why book banning is dangerous. To the point that I made earlier, look, I've got 3 young daughters. There are certain books that my wife and I don't think are age appropriate for them. We would encourage them not to read them. But we cannot tell other kids what books to read, or parents what other books to teach their kids to read. So there should not be a difference between Southern Illinois and downtown Chicago or Arkansas or New York City. That's the whole point of this bill, and it's also why book bans are so dangerous. Why should kids who live in Chicago have access to every book, yet kids who live in Carbondale or Metro East not have access to these books?
But what you're saying seems to contradict what you just said to Tehran about election deniers or Holocaust deniers or whatever.
It doesn't contradict at all what I said. What I said was the purpose of the bill is not to tell librarians what to put in there. It just says we cannot unilaterally yank out books because of a complaint by a certain parent. There's a process that's involved.
Governor, an off-topic question. Interviewed in another media have reported on some poor conditions that some migrants in the city-run shelters are experiencing. Some people saying they were receiving better care when they were sleeping on the floor of police stations. Has the state been receiving any complaints about the conditions in these shelters, and what oversight and responsibility does the state have for the care that's being provided in the city to migrants?
Well, the state doesn't provide oversight to the city. The state does provide support, however. As you know, we've provided multiple times the amount of funding that the city has had available to support the city. And we've also provided our personnel at the state level from the Department of Human Services. We also are in direct communication with folks, the nonprofit organizations in Texas, where many of these asylum seekers are being sent from. And we're doing as much as we are asked to do, as much as we can do to try to provide help at the local level in the city so that people have food, clothing, shelter, the basic needs, health care that they need. And of course, I've been imploring the White House and the federal government to do 2 things. One is we need comprehensive immigration reform. But in the meantime, we ought to be allowing at least the asylum seekers who came here in the latter half of last year to now get work permits. We have jobs available for them. It would be better for them and better for everybody if they could work. They want to work. And so we've asked the White House to help us with that. They're looking at it, working on it, and say that they'll get back to us.
We can do one more. Library question. Library question. I believe there's a bill in the works to protect librarians. And can you tell us more about what that means and the status?
Go ahead.
So I don't know. We'll look into it. I will tell you that the whole premise, most of the premise of this bill and our inspiration for this bill was hearing from librarians throughout the state who have never seen a level of intimidation, threats to violence, and job insecurity like they have across the state, whether it's in the western suburbs, whether it's in downstate Illinois. So that's been really troubling. We should be applauding them, and they've never felt this harassed. So hopefully this shows librarians across the state that we support them. And by the way, to me, this should not be a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a freedom of speech, a freedom of education issue. So not once during the course of the last few months have we ever asked a librarian who's pat us on the back or have given us information whether they're Democrats or Republicans. Not once have we asked an administrator if they're Democrats or Republicans. Not once have we asked a library staff member or literary leader what party they are. So to get 0 votes in the House and the Senate from the Republicans on this is disconcerting. It's troubling. Doesn't make me feel good, but it shows that unfortunately a lot of things have become strictly political these days.
I was going to take this one last question. Sorry, I pointed at you and then we got. Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you still intend to veto the Ameren right of first refusal for transmission line?
Yes, I do.
Do you have a sense of when?
I mean, it'll be, I'm sure, taken up or considered in November, so there's a lot of time this summer to do it. Thank you very much.